Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show that takes years of complex scientific research and really boils it down. We give you the essential insights, a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we're taking a journey, metaphorically speaking, down one of Europe's major rivers, the Rhine. We're looking at a massive piece of long-term ecological research. We're diving into the paper led by Gwendoline Lehen and colleagues. The title is Alien Species and Climate Change Drive Shifts in a Riverine Fish Community and Trait Compositions Over 35 Years.
Yeah, this deep dive is incredibly timely. It's a huge study. It tracks the Rhine over a really long period. What was it, 1984, all the way through 2018.
35 years.
Exactly. And it gives us this rare sort of quantitative history of how fish communities cope, under relentless pressure.
And the pressure comes from two big things.
That's right. Two major forces: the arrival of invasive species, alien species, and also these profound shifts in the local climate.
Okay, so the central question for you, listening throughout this deep dive, is really this. When these non-native species come into a stressed ecosystem, are they just replacing the locals? Or are they actually changing what the ecosystem does? We're not just looking at who is there, that's the taxonomic shift, but also what job they perform, the functional shift.
And that distinction, that's really the key innovation here. Freshwater ecosystems, they're some of the most threatened globally. Huge human impacts.
Right.
And we know alien species often cause extinctions, loss of biodiversity, but we haven't had this kind of really long-term view on the functional side of things. What happens to the roles when the players change?
So let's clarify functional then. This study isn't just counting fish, right? It goes deeper.
Much deeper. They're using the lens of functional ecology, looking at traits.
Traits, like characteristics.
Exactly. Think of them as like the species job description.
Yeah.
Ecological things like diet, or eating plants, insects, other fish, habitat preference, do you like open water or hiding on the bottom? And biological stuff too, like how big do you get, how long do you live? By tracking changes in these traits for the whole community, we get a picture of whether the roles in the river are being maintained, even if different species are filling them.
And the Rhine itself, it's not exactly a pristine wilderness, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. It's one of the most engineered, human-impacted rivers in Europe, highly managed for shipping industry.
And there's a key date here for the alien species story.
Yes, 1992. That's crucial. That's when the Rhine-Main-Danube Canal opened.
Ah, connecting different river systems.
Precisely. It effectively created this superhighway, linking the Rhine catchment all the way to the Pontic-Caspian region, think the Black Sea area.
So a direct route for invasion.
A direct route for a whole host of, frankly, a highly competitive alien species to just move right in and set up shop in the Rhine.
So the stage was set for a big ecological shakeup. How did they actually collect data for 35 years? That sounds like a huge undertaking.
It was. They managed to leverage standardized long-term biomonitoring data. This was collected across 31 different sites, consistently over those 3.5 decades.
Wow.
Yeah, the sheer scale is what makes this paper so powerful. We're talking tens of thousands of individual fish identified.
And like you said, they didn't just count them. They went beyond just the species list.
That's right. So they combine the standard stuff species richness, how many species are there, and abundance, how many individuals, with this detailed functional analysis. They measured 25 different traits.
Yeah.
And importantly, they didn't just look at the river itself. They brought in external drivers as predictors, specifically local climate data, temperature and precipitation, and of course the changing richness and abundance of those alien species.
Now, you mentioned this 35-year story wasn't just gradual. There was a specific turning point.
Yes, the statistical models they ran actually flagged a really clear critical moment, a big shift in the whole community composition around the year 2000.
2010, so quite recently in the study period.
Relatively, yeah. It was such a distinct dividing line that they actually split their analysis into two phases. The period before 2010, so 1984 to 2010, and then that final, really rapid period of change from 2010 to 2018.
Okay, let's unpack that change, starting with the big picture, the taxonomy, over the full 35 years. What happened to the total number of species? Did it go up or down?
Well, perhaps, surprisingly, the total species richness actually went up by almost 50%.
Oh, okay, so more species overall.
Yes, but that figure is a bit misleading because when you dig into it, of the total species they found, 11 were aliens. And the really concerning part is that native species richness declined by over a quarter.
So
And native abundance, the actual number of native fish individuals dropped by half.
well,
So yeah, the new species were coming in, but the original inhabitants were really suffering.
In that period before 2010, before the big alien boom, you said it was particularly tough.
It was a crash, a really dramatic crash. In those first 26 years, from 84 to 2010, the overall fish abundance, all fish counted together, plummeted by nearly 90%.
90%, that's catastrophic.
It really is a massive loss of fish biomass. And crucially, during that time, the few alien species that were around, things like common carp, maybe European catfish, they made up less than 1% of the total fish numbers.
Okay, so that tells us something important.
It tells us that whatever caused that initial massive crash in the native fish populations, it wasn't the aliens. They weren't really a factor yet.
That feels a bit counterintuitive. The canal opened in 92, right? So the pathway was there. Why the big crash first, and then the aliens only taking off years later? What was hammering the native fish so badly in the 80s and 90s?
Well, that points to one of the study's limitations, which we should definitely come back to. But the short answer is likely a legacy of other human activities.
Like pollution, habitat changes.
Exactly. Historical pollution, ongoing habitat degradation, maybe changes in river flow from dams and engineering. These were probably huge stressors that weakened the native population significantly before the main wave of Ponto-Caspian invaders arrived. The natives were already vulnerable.
Okay, so we've got this native community really struggling, hitting rock bottom around 2010, and then, boom, the last 8 years of the study.
A huge rapid rebound in total numbers. Overall fish abundance soared by almost 700% between 2010 and 2018.
Wow, back to original levels.
Pretty much back up to the levels they recorded right at the start in 1984. But, and this is the crucial but, this explosive growth was driven almost entirely by the successful establishment of 6 new alien species that arrived and took hold between 2010 and 2013.
So the river's full again, but it's like a completely different cast of characters.
Yeah.
How dominant did these newcomers actually become?
Well, by 2018, alien species made up 30% of the total species richness. But the abundance figures, the sheer numbers, are even more stark.
Go on.
By the end of the study, aliens accounted for nearly a third of all individual fish counted. And that figure actually peaked higher in 2015, almost 70% alien individuals.
70%.
Yeah. But the real headline grabber, the most dominant player by far.
It has to be the round goby, right?
Yeah.
I've heard about this one.
Absolutely. The round goby, Neogobius melanostomus, it just became the undisputed champion of the Rhine's benthic zone.
How dominant are we talking?
By 2018, this one single species accounted for, wait for it, almost 99% of the total alien abundance.
99%.
Of all the aliens.
Yes. It just completely swamped the other invaders and, of course, was vastly outnumbering the remaining natives in many areas. It shows just how incredibly successful a single, highly adapted invader can be when conditions align.
That level of dominance is, well, it's staggering. How does one species even do that, especially an invader? What makes the goby such a powerhouse in these disturbed European rivers?
Well, gobies, particularly the round goby, have a suite of traits that give them a massive advantage in systems like the Rhine. They breed really prolifically multiple times a year.
They're also very aggressive nesters, guarding their eggs, which helps survival rates. And crucially, they're incredibly adaptable feeders, especially focusing on benthic invertebrates, the little critters living on the river bottom. They're just very, very good at exploiting that resource in disturbed conditions.
And this ties into the drivers behind that post-2010 boom, doesn't it?
It does, because the goby, like other Ponto-Caspian species, had technically been able to reach the Rhine since '92, so why the explosion after 2010?
Right. What changed?
Well, the analysis linked that major compositional shift after 2010 not just to the presence and rising abundance of aliens, but critically also to climate factors. Temperature, yes. Over the 35 years of the study, they measured an increase in mean annual water temperature of almost a full degree Celsius, about 0.94 degrees C.
That doesn't sound like a lot, but for fish.
For ectothermic animals, fish, whose body temperature depends on the environment, it can be huge. That warming likely pushed the river conditions across certain physiological thresholds.
Thresholds that were previously holding these invaders back.
Exactly. It might have improved their breeding success, their overwinter survival, their growth rates, essentially making the Rhine a much more welcoming habitat for them. The study also noted an increase in precipitation, which could mean altered flow patterns, also potentially favoring adaptable invaders over specialized natives.
So the canal provided the route, the earlier environmental damage weakened the natives, and then climate change basically unlocked the door for the invaders after 2010.
That seems to be the most plausible narrative, yes.
Okay, let's pivot back to the function then, the job descriptions. If the round goby and its kin took over, what did that do to the overall functional profile of the fish community?
Well, the types of traits that were most common, what the researchers called trait modalities, did change significantly. This reflects the goby's success story.
How so?
Post-2010, the community structure shifted. It became dominated by species that are smaller as adults, have shorter lifespans, and this is key strongly prefer benthic and demersal habitats.
Bottom dwellers, bottom feeders.
Exactly, living on or near the riverbed, feeding there. That's a big shift from potentially a more diverse community using different water column levels before the crash.
Okay, so smaller, faster living, bottom-hugging fish became the new standard. That sounds like a pretty radical functional change on the surface.
It does, doesn't it?
But here comes the twist, right? The big paradox revealed in the paper. Despite this huge taxonomic turnover, the shift in the types of traits, what happened to the overall functional diversity?
This is really the most striking, perhaps counterintuitive finding. The overall functional diversity metrics, these are calculations that look at the total range of traits present, how evenly they're spread, how different they are from each other. These metrics showed no significant change after 2010.
Wait, say that again. No significant change.
No significant change in things like functional richness, functional divergence, functional evenness after that 2010 turning point.
That's baffling. How can you lose half your native fish, get swamped by basically one alien species, see a shift to bottom-dwelling traits, and yet the river's overall functional toolkit registers as stable?
It really forces us to wrestle with two main interpretations, and both are pretty significant.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is functional redundancy. The idea here is that the incoming alien species, especially that dominant round goby, just happened to possess a very similar set of functional traits to the native species that were lost.
So they were like-for-like replacements.
In a functional sense, yes. Imagine the ecosystem has certain jobs that need doing. When the native workers declined or disappeared, these new alien workers arrived who were able and very willing to do basically the same jobs. They filled the vacant niches, maintaining the overall functional structure.
Okay, redundancy. What's the second possibility?
The second is environmental filtering. This suggests that the conditions in the Rhine, perhaps due to that long history of human impact, the pollution, the altered flows, and the warming climate, were already acting as a really strong filter.
How do you mean a filter?
Meaning the environment itself was so harsh or specific that it only allowed organisms with a very particular set of resilient traits to thrive. It selected for certain characteristics.
Ah, so it didn't matter if you were native or alien?
Exactly. To succeed in the modern Rhine, maybe you had to be smallish, fast-living, adaptable, probably good at bottom feeding. So the surviving natives and the successful aliens ended up sharing those traits because the environment forced them to. The functional space was already constrained.
Okay. But thinking back, didn't the study find some functional change happening before 2010 during the native crash?
It did, yes. That's a really important nuance. The one functional metric that did change significantly over the whole period was something called ecological trait dispersion, or TDIs, and it increased between 1984 and 2010.
Okay, TD has increased. What does that mean in simpler terms?
Think of it like this. As native species were declining before 2010, the ones disappearing were perhaps the generalists or those occupying similar roles. When you lose species from the crowded middle of the functional space, the remaining species, which might be more specialized or different from each other, appear further apart functionally.
So the functional web was getting holes in it, becoming less continuous.
That's a good way to put it. TDS increasing suggested that functional gaps were opening up in the community structure as the natives declined. Then, after 2010, the aliens arrived and presumably filled those gaps, which might explain why other functional diversity metrics then stabilized.
This really does flip the script on how we often think about invasive species, doesn't it? Usually they're framed purely as a threat to function.
Absolutely.
But here, in this heavily disturbed river, they seem to be, well, almost propping up the ecosystem's functional structure, at least in the short term.
That's the really profound implication stirring discussion. This study strongly suggests that alien species can simultaneously hammer native biodiversity and potentially contribute to maintaining overall ecosystem functioning, especially by filling voids left open in already stressed systems.
Which has huge implications for how we manage these systems, how we even define health.
Exactly. It challenges some fundamental ideas in conservation, particularly in these novel human-dominated ecosystems. Is a system healthy if its functions are maintained, but by non-native species?
The tough question. Now, this research is impressive, but you mentioned limitations. What was missing from the data, especially regarding that initial native crash before 2010?
Right. The initial driver of the native decline remains a bit fuzzy. The long-term monitoring data, while great for fish, lacked consistent, standardized records over the full 35 years for other key human impact variables.
Like what specifically?
Things like detailed water flow regulation changes from dams, precise mapping of land use changes in the surrounding catchment, robust long-term data on specific pollutants, and reliable estimates of fishing pressure. Without those pieces, it's hard to definitively point the finger at the exact cause or combination of causes for that pre-2010 native crash.
So other stressors were likely involved but weren't fully captured in this analysis.
Correct. And another point the authors raise is about the traits themselves.
Functional traits they measured.
Yeah. They used existing databases, which are mostly built around native European fish. It's possible that some of these highly successful Ponto-Caspian invaders possess novel traits, unique characteristics, or behaviors not typically found in native species.
So the current functional metrics might be missing some subtle ways the aliens are changing things?
Potentially. Future research could try to identify and include these potentially novel alien traits. That would give us an even clearer picture of whether the aliens are truly just functionally redundant replacements, or if they are, perhaps, introducing entirely new ecological dynamics that we aren't yet measuring properly.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Looking back at our mission for this deep dive, what's the core takeaway? The research clearly shows the Rhine fish community underwent this profound taxonomic turnover. It shifted dramatically from a native-dominated system to one heavily influenced, even dominated, by alien species, especially those Ponto-Caspian gobies.
And this shift seems driven by that combination of human-created pathways like the canal, legacy impacts weakening natives, and crucially, accelerated or enabled by recent climate warming.
But, and it's a big but, beneath that dramatic change in who lives there, the paper suggests the river's overall function, at least based on current metrics, seems surprisingly resilient.
Resilient, or at least stabilized. The alien species appear to have stepped in and maintained the overall functional profile after the native populations crashed.
Which brings us right to that final provocative thought for you to ponder. Given this evidence of high functional redundancy in a stressed habitat where non-native species seem to maintain ecosystem functions, does this change how we should think about ecosystem health?
Should conservation priorities shift perhaps towards preserving function, even if it's delivered by aliens, especially in these heavily human-altered systems where restoring a pristine native state might be impossible?
It's the ultimate conservation dilemma, really.
Yep.
What do we value most? Nativeness or function?
A really complex question with no easy answer.
A fascinating dilemma indeed, and a crucial one for the future of managing our planet's ecosystems. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.